Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. I'm Stephen Galpin, and today we're on a little bit of a different format. We're evoking our French connection. So joining me today is Joanna Leggett, co-founder of Leggett Immobilier, French property experts. Welcome to you, Joanna.
Thank you, Stephen.
Nice to have you here in the UK. Joanna, what I'm going to do is ask you a couple of questions throughout the show, and then we're going to have a discussion about some of the special areas in France that you perhaps recommend as good places to invest and be.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's get on with the first question, which is, what are the best areas to live in around Bordeaux? In the short term, we would like to be fairly central, but then move out to the suburbs in the next couple of years. Any pointers as to where to visit and check out would be greatly appreciated, along with price level indicators. Now, just before you answer, I've got a question attached to that. Somebody going out to France who's looking at a 2-year situation to move on, aren't they going to find it a bit prohibitive, sort of in and out costs, really? Don't they need to clear their mind a little bit before they go?
Yeah, and I would say it's a different type of buyer in France. The buyers that we're selling to is most of the properties that we're selling are for permanent resident or a holiday home, and they tend to be going 5-year, 10-year or 15 years.
Yeah.
Most people might sell in 15 years because of grandchildren or divorce or somebody's ill and wants to come home. It's usually for those reasons. It's generally not because they've wanted to make some money in 2 years, and because you won't. Let's face it, you're not going to make money.
Well, not in 2 years anyway.
No, not at all. And so, yes, you're going to have, you don't pay notaires fees as a seller, but you do pay notaires fees as a buyer. So obviously you're going to have those costs when you buy, but you're not going to have them when you sell.
Okay.
So you're only going to be paying the fees once.
All right. So I'll let you move on with the answer to the question there,
Yeah.
which is, where should we buy around Bordeaux?
Well, Bordeaux is a beautiful city. You know, it was rejuvenated maybe 6-7 years ago now. It's a fantastic place to live. Obviously, the prices have gone up. It's the City du Vin, so you've got all the wine city as well. Loads of culture, theatres, everything. It's a great city to buy in. But you'd be looking at around sort of 2,700 per square metre there to buy in Bordeaux itself. However, if you sort of went 45 minutes out of Bordeaux, going towards, say, Saint-Emilion, again, beautiful city, full of wine, Saint-Emilion wine, or all of those surrounding areas, you'd be looking at around 2,000. So it's about 700.
You are teetotal, aren't you?
700 square metres. No, you can't be teetotal to live in France. Right. Well, you can, of course. But yeah, so 45 minutes, I would say, going towards Saint-Emilion, again, you'd be dropping 700 per square metre to be out in the countryside as such. The interesting thing is, us as British, we are used to commuting. The French don't commute at all. So if it's 20 minutes, that's too far. So you won't see people driving in 40 minutes drive. They will literally live where they work. And probably 10 minutes is the most they would go out.
So in a place like Bordeaux, what would the transport infrastructure be like? Would it be good public transport?
Yeah, there's trams. Obviously, it's a city, but a lot of pedestrianised areas. So there's a lot of tram lines everywhere. You've got an international airport that flies all around the world. You've got the train station, which is fantastic. The train from Bordeaux to Paris is 2 hours. It's a fast train, and you know, to drive is going to take 6. So you know, to be able to get on a train for 2 hours, people can commute. So we have seen a lot of Parisians since the pandemic moving to Bordeaux, where it's a lot cheaper, very, very similar in culture. You know, it's beautiful buildings, lovely architecture. So Bordeaux itself, we have seen a huge increase in people and families buying there.
Just on the logistics of travel, coming from, say, London, what would you do? Would you catch Eurostar to Paris and then take the train out of Paris?
I like travelling by train, and I can work on the train because your internet works, etc., etc. So I generally do that. So I live close to Angoulême, so for me to get the train to Bordeaux is actually only half an hour, but to drive is an hour and a half. So the fast trains, this train system and infrastructure in France is brilliant. You know, you can be anywhere very, very quickly. So yes, from where I live, which is Angoulême, which is half an hour on the train from Bordeaux, you go to Paris, change station at Paris, and then you're straight into London. So for example, yesterday I got the 6:20 train and I was here at 11:30. So, you know, obviously with the hour difference. Yeah, it's a great way to travel. But Bordeaux has an airport, you know, there's lots of airports, which are Ryanair or EasyJet or the low-cost airlines, plus Air France. There's lots of airlines in Bordeaux itself. So yeah, it's a really easy place to get to. However, when you live there, you need a car.
Right.
Because France is enormous. And unless you're actually doing city living, you have to drive. Because, for example, where I live in the countryside, not Bordeaux, there is no bus. You have to be able to drive. So,
but I think the post-Brexit rules have changed on cars, haven't they? Haven't you got to have a French car now?
Well, I would always recommend having a French car anyway. Yes, because otherwise you're going to be paying import tax on your now on your British car. You are going to have to change it if it's not for a holiday home. You can bring your car and go as you please. But if you're living there and bringing a car over, I wouldn't recommend it. I would sell your car and buy a French one, because you're going to have to change the number plates to French number plates. You're going to have to get a carte grise, which is like your logbook in France. You're going to be driving on the other side of the road, so your steering wheel's going to be in the wrong place for overtaking. So yeah, it's I would always advise selling your car and buying a French car if you're living there permanently.
Okay. Now, just typically, what sort of property would be available around Bordeaux? Is there any new build, or is it all?
Yeah, I mean, Bordeaux has quite a lot of new build going on in just outside the centre itself. Very good prices, as I said, under 3,000 per square metre, which is a lot less than Paris. Lots of new builds. You've got the big river right the way through Bordeaux, and there's lots of new builds going along the river. So yeah, there's lots of opportunity there. But there's also, because it's like the sandstone colour, you've got great, beautiful architectural, bearing in mind it's a wine region, so you've got a lot of old chateaus or small chateaus, lots of vineyards around. So although they might not be run as vineyards anymore, the properties would have the outbuildings and stuff.
So what would a nice new 2-bedroom new build flat cost on the river?
I'd say probably around 350 to 400,000 euros.
That's half the quarter of the price of London,
yeah,
isn't
yeah,
it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you can get some fabulous apartments in France for compared to London, it's unbelievably cheap. Yeah. But saying that, just because the properties are cheap, the cost of living's the same.
Right,
so they just remember that, and the cost of any renovation work is the same as the UK as well.
That is a good footnote, isn't it? Okay, and just going back to the original idea here, I'm going to be buying, I want to stay there for a couple of years and then move out of Bordeaux a little bit. But I know rentals are not something that you deal with personally, but would you say to a person like this who's a little bit undecided in that way, why don't you rent for a year or something and then take that time to buy? Would that be a good strategy?
Some people do that, but I always think if you're moving from the UK, you should have first of all done your research and because the location is the most important thing. France is the biggest country in Western Europe, so you could be travelling half an hour between 2 villages or 2 towns. So it's huge. So you really need to know where you want to be.
And if you do get it right anyway, and you are in the right area, then actually it's a year's money wasted on rent, isn't it?
Well, exactly, yeah. And the funny thing is, because we do a lot of exhibitions in the UK, and we see a lot of clients that will say, well, we're going to rent and then we're going to look around and then we're going to decide where we're going to be. They always end up buying in the village or the town that they've rented in, because you start building a circle of friends,
of course,
and you start having a social life. And unless you absolutely hate it, which is very rare, they tend to buy in the village that they were looking in. So again, if you know your location, then find the right property. And at the moment, properties are scarce. So if you find the right property, jump on it while you can.
Well, if you have got that shortage and things aren't selling that quickly, it's a must, isn't it? Okay, and I suppose just as a generality then, that Bordeaux is an area that you'd highly recommend.
Oh, totally. I mean, it's one of my, if I was going to be living in a city, that's where I'd live. There or Paris, they're my 2 favourites. But Bordeaux, and also Bordeaux has an international school, which a lot of parents, for example, we've talked about it in our other shows, where if you've got a 14-year-old and they're in the British curriculum, they can follow that at Bordeaux in the international school. Prices for public schools and private schools is so much cheaper than it is in the UK. Really? The fees are very, very low in comparison, and they're subsidised by the government as well. So, if you were worrying about that, in Bordeaux they can follow the English curriculum and do the same exams, etc., in the international school, and speak in English if the children don't speak French.
And as we've talked in another show, I presume that the broadband facilities are great there.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I mean they will have the cabling. What's it called? I've forgotten the name of it.
Fibre cable.
Yeah, the fibre optic cables. Yes, they will. Yeah, in Bordeaux.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do most of the big towns have the satellite broadband too?
No, actually I use satellite. It works brilliantly well in the countryside. It doesn't work in cities for some reason.
We've
too
got
many
the same
obstructions.
got the same problem here. There
Yeah.
are 1 or 2 postcodes in London that you can get good satellite reception, but they need to get over that one, don't they?
Well, my satellite in my village went from 9 meg on the normal internet to 257.
Right.
So it's huge, the satellite, and it works brilliantly well in countryside locations, but not so well in cities.
Well, fingers crossed for that progression.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's all we've got time for in this half of the show. So join me again after the break when we'll be asking Joanna more of your questions. Hello and welcome back to part 2 of Property Question Time with our French connection, Joanna Leggett. Joanna, I'm looking to buy a holiday home in one of the French ski resorts as close to Switzerland as possible, but within French borders. Am I best trying to buy out of season, or are the prices pretty stable throughout the year? Any advice on recommended resorts would also be appreciated.
Yep, sure. Well, first of all, the prices don't change in or out of season because the Alps has an all year season, because some resorts like Chamonix, for example, have more tourists visiting in the summer than they do in the winter. So great areas for investment. If you want to be close to Switzerland, then places like Chamonix or Morzine would be good. Or even if you haven't thought about the lakes, you've got Lac Léman, where literally the south of it is literally Geneva and Switzerland, so you could be there. The prices in France are a lot cheaper than they are in Switzerland as well, and so are the taxes. So you get a lot of Swiss moving.
Tell me about it. I used to live in Villars, which is just the far end of Lac Léman.
Right, okay.
And your service charges, your government taxes, your army taxes, your police taxes.
Well, we see a lot of Swiss buying just over the border, and just the living, because they're working in Switzerland, but they're living in France because it is such a difference in costs. But there's Evian-les-Bains, which is a beautiful area, beautiful ski area, and you're very, very close to Switzerland. So Mont Blanc, of course, is very close to the Swiss border. But it is anywhere that you go in the Alps. I mean, the Alps are beautiful, depending on the height, the summer season as well. So it's a very, very good area for investment.
Yeah, I suppose one of the other things as well, I know in Switzerland you have a restriction on who you can sell to. It's okay, certain properties are designated for overseas buyers, but once those overseas buyers are bought, they have to then resell into the Swiss-only market. And that can be so restrictive.
Yeah, it's absolutely nothing like that in France.
I remember going back, I think, 10 years after I sold. No inflation, nothing. It was still the same price.
Really? Yeah, no, it's totally different in France.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great new builds in the French Alps as well coming up now, which is definitely worth having a look at if you want something completely brand new. But no, it's nothing. The Alps actually relies on its international market. So now we're seeing fewer Russians, but we're seeing more Americans and Europeans and Brazilians even, funnily enough. So there's no restrictions. Anybody can buy in the Alps. And it's some of the best skiing in Europe. So obviously you will get a huge international clientele buying there as well.
Yes. And I suppose, again, the opportunities to stay now in France legitimately for those longer periods is also going to be helpful. Because, again, I think living in Switzerland, people say, don't you get bored in the summer when there's no skiing? Well, no. Sort of alpine tennis, walking, all that sort of, it's just lovely, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing. And I think people forget that. And if they're looking at areas to make investment and they're not skiers, go and enjoy your holiday home in the summer. I mean, the Alps has got beautiful lakes everywhere. You've got the mountains, you've got walking, cycling, whitewater rafting, climbing. There's and you've got all that beautiful fresh air. There's lots of natural spas. For example, in I forgot the name of the town now. There's L'Oréal have just opened up a spa in Saint-Gervais. Beautiful, totally different architecture as well, depending on which resorts you're in. So there's just choice for everyone, whether you want to be families or experienced skiers or off-piste skiers. There's so much variety, and so it's definitely a great area for investment.
Yeah. And I think as we just talked about, it's people really do have the wrong impression, don't they? I think the Alps is only that period from sort of December to April, and it really isn't. I mean, the other times are just beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say if you're going to live there permanently, you would be a skier, because you're not going to be living in a ski resort full of snow if you don't actually ski, I would have thought. But there are lots of other mountain activities that you can be doing. However, obviously Brexit has affected the time that you can stay if it's a holiday home. But if you're a permanent resident, you would now have to apply for a residency permit to be able to live there full time, which it's easy to do. And I would imagine if you're living in a ski resort, you've probably got rental income. If you're buying a chalet, or you might just be buying an apartment for yourself.
Well, you're just doing the same job again. We're all off to...
yeah. Well, I mean, the French Alps is fantastic. You know, I've skied all around the world, but I love the Alps. I like the après ski. You've got the little restaurants coming down the mountains that you don't get in the States, for example. No. So we do see a lot of Americans now buying in the French Alps. Yes. And with the strong dollar over the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of Americans coming.
And the French Alps resorts are I just think far less formal or rigid than perhaps some of the German side of Switzerland. Where like, you know, Zurich places. It's so formal, isn't it? Yeah. But I think in France it's so much easier.
Yeah, I just the French culture itself is just a lovely way of life. You know, it's a very slow paced, great way of life, whether you're in the Alps or you're in a city, or you know, it is a different culture, and that's what makes the French Alps so popular. Plus the guarantee of the snow. You know, okay, on the border of Switzerland, you'll have it in Switzerland, but if you were comparing Switzerland to France, I would without doubt choose France.
I suppose the only thing you just should watch if you're going over there to make it your permanent home, if you're not particularly interested in skiing, then just watch the service charges in the ski resorts, because you are going to be paying for skiing equipment, aren't you? You know, your lifts, your road clearance and all the rest of it.
Yes, some, that's in your taxes. That's just in your normal taxes. You don't actually have a service charge as such. You would just be paying your taxe foncière and your taxe habitation. And they are talking about abolishing the taxe habitation and just having one tax. But that, depending on where you are, it's the same as living in the countryside. If you've got bin collection and street lights, you'll pay more than someone who's in a rural area with a septic tank and you know, and no bins.
Yeah. I suppose all these considerations, again, if you've got a good agent, vis-a-vis yourselves, for instance, you know, you'll have all this information and you'll be able to assess that.
And I think the good thing, not just saying with ourselves, but all of our agents live and work in the Alps. You know, we've got almost 100 agents in the Alps, so they all live and work there. They all know their resorts inside out. They know everyone in the resort. You know, I've been out with some of the chats walking down the road, and it's like the boulangerie knows him. There's somebody else. Everybody just comes out and says hello. So, you know, they really are experienced at skiing, but also they know the resorts really well.
Well, like I said, we'll be out next week.
Yeah. I shall book you in.
Thank you very much. John, just to finish off, I wonder if you'd be kind enough to give us your view on the French market overall, and perhaps some of the favourite areas of the moment that are attracting sort of big investment from the UK in particular?
Well, from the UK, I mean, usually Spain is the #1 destination for Brits, but with the rising temperatures that Spain's been having and the fires and everything that was caused through Portugal and Spain last year, we are seeing a lot of people coming from Spain. British people that moved to Spain coming from Spain to France. So France has great weather. I mean, even up in the north, Normandy and Brittany. Brittany, for example, has a microclimate. It's so popular with Brits, particularly if you're driving over, because it's not too far to drive to. You can come off the ferry, beautiful coastline, lovely summers, you know, lovely warm microclimate summers. If you're bringing pets, for example, you want to drive, and so Brittany has always been popular, and the prices are brilliant. You know, you can buy a 3-bedroom home for €100,000. You know, in London, you'd be looking at a garage for that. You know,
if you're lucky.
Exactly. So those areas, the southwest of France has always been popular. Brits do tend to buy in rural countryside locations. We do, unless they're working, and then they obviously will buy in cities. Or we see them buying a country home because the property prices are so great, and they buy a little pied-à-terre maybe in Paris or Toulouse or in Nice, you know, whatever, and then they might have the choice of two. Because obviously once you're off the island in the UK, you can just jump in your car and drive anywhere.
Sure.
Without worrying about flights and ferries.
And what about the south of France? Is that still so attractive?
Yeah, the south of France is very similar to the Alps, where it's an international clientele that buy there. It's always been a favourite. I mean, it's beautiful. The French Riviera, Cannes, film festivals, Monaco on the doorstep as such. And it is a stunning, beautiful area.
I used to love the helicopter trip up from Nice up
to
Monte Carlo.
Yeah.
makes you feel so cool, doesn't it?
It is, and that's going in and out. But the thing, I think what we forget though, the south of France is also the Languedoc-Roussillon area, areas like Béziers and Narbonne and things which are just on the Spanish border as opposed to the Italian border. Really popular, and about half the price of what it would be in the Riviera as such. So, you know, going along the coastline, you're still getting the beautiful weather, you're still on the Mediterranean, but the costs, and you have a lot more history. You've got Qatar castles. It was a big wine producing area where the Côte d'Azur didn't exist in those days. So you get a lot of history around those areas as well. So that's always worth looking at.
That's terrific. Well, Joanna, once again, you've proven that you're our go-to lady for anything French. Thank you very much for coming over and coming on the programme today. It's really great. So I'm Stephen Galpin. Thank you very much for watching. Join me again on Property Question Time next time.